Chapter 11 Mountain Lion. The hounds had not been trailing with any seriousness, but when the gay crowd of people came from the ranch and shouted encouragement, they became more interested and settled down to hard work. The trail was very stale. Part of the time Reddy followed the tracks more by sight than by scent, plunging through the snow with great leaps, which broke a path for the others. Those from the ranch who did not have snowshoes soon had to turn back, leaving Johnny, Marshall, the foreman, and the two children to follow the chase, which now was heading definitely for the mountains. Marshall was greatly excited and already getting out of breath. "How do you suppose the hounds happened to find the trail?" he asked Johnny. "And why did they start to follow it if they knew nothing about mountain lions?" The ranger, too, had been considering this. They were cooped up in the car for so many days, he said, that when they had a good chance to get out like this and run around for a bit, they just naturally cut loose and probably hit the lion trail merely by luck. I think that scent must be pretty gamey, probably like that of a lynx, but stronger. So they just opened up on it for fun. When we joined in, they knew at once that they were doing something worthwhile. Now I believe they're excited enough to stick to it until they find the cats, no matter how long it takes or what they go through. We'll have to keep with them to shoot them before they're killed. They don't know what they're in for." With this, the ranger agreed. "I was worried mainly because the snow will make it hard for them to dodge," he said. "Will it be deeper in the mountains?" "No doubt a little deeper, but softer." "Then at least one of us should always manage to be near them," said Johnny, adding more length to his own strides. Not more than 100 yards ahead, the hounds were plowing laboriously up the side of a rocky little ridge. "We'll go around," panted Marshall. This helped them to gain ground and actually cross the cat's trail on the other side, ahead of the hounds. Reddy, however, was already plowing and sliding down the ridge with the other two strung out several yards behind, all giving tongue after 4 or 5 jumps. It wasn't the kind of wild music that a pack can give when really close to game on a hot trail, but it was thrilling enough in the still cold air. The Marshall children were delighted with everything about the hunt, and stayed almost at Johnny's heels no matter how fast he strode. It was evident that they were experts with snowshoes. Soon the trail led into the foothills, and then into the heavily timbered mountains. Evergreens hid the hounds, but their baying showed the way perfectly, that the shortcuts could be taken to avoid needless climbing, particularly as both Marshall and the foreman knew all of the paths. Twice they were nearly run down by stampeding herds of elk, which had been frightened by the hounds, and many times they saw gray mule deer flashing to safer country. "I can't keep up this pace," Marshall called, when they were going over a pass between the two peaks. "Don't wait for me." They left him to follow more slowly, but it was not long before the foreman also gave out. Johnny glanced at Patricia and noted that she at least had no intentions of giving up. Her cheeks were a healthy crimson from the hard exercise, and her eyes were fairly sparkling with excitement. Behind her, Bob trudged along doggedly, but with less confidence. If the cats had not circled and zigzagged considerably, it would have been no easy matter to keep up with the chase, for the climbing grew harder and the air more rarefied. Marshall had pointed out the rugged peak for which he thought the lion's trail was heading, a peak so steep and rocky that in many places the snow had not clung to the cliffs. He'd been right in his surmise, for now the hounds were working among the boulders and crevices at the base of its steepest ascent. Johnny shouted in an endeavor to stop them until he could catch up. This looked like the kind of place in which a wily animal would hide during the daytime. Reddy heard him and looked back to find out what Johnny wanted, but the other two would not stop. While Reddy stood still, they forged ahead. "Ned! Bill!" shouted Johnny. "Whoa there! You, Nell, come here!" But it was no use. They'd caught a new scent, the odor of the cats themselves, which were hidden in a crevice above the ledge. Johnny knew from the way they climbed with heads held high that this was it. the moment before the mountain lions would either burst forth and run away, or else charge and fight. So he unslung the rifle from his shoulder and put everything he had into the climb. Below the ledge, Reddy stood still, looking first at Johnny, and then up at the cliff. He longed to go ahead, but he did not budge. A terrific baying suddenly sounded from above, and then a series of wild yelps. Reddy could stand this no longer and charged up the cliff. But halfway up he was met by Bill, tearing down the slope, yowling at the top of his lungs. It was then that Johnny caught the first glimpse of the lions. One of them, its dark yellow color making it easily visible, was bounding along the ledge with Nell close behind. The lion looked much larger than the hound, but nothing like the size of the huge tawny beast, which suddenly came in big leaps along a higher shelf, and before Johnny could aim and shoot, hurled itself with legs outspread and tail head high, straight through the air on top of Nell, who was swept from her feet and rolled head over heels down the cliff with the lion wrapped around her. Down they came amid a flying mass of snow, with Reddy leaping to intercept them and roaring with rage. But before Reddy could come anywhere near, the lion let go of his hold, came to his feet, and after a moment of snarling defiance, leapt towards the rocks and vanished around the side of the mountain, which Johnny was throwing lead after him. It was all in vain, though. "Reddy, come here! Reddy! Reddy!" shouted Johnny, trying to stop the hound, who he felt sure would be killed. But this time Reddy would no more mind him than he would the wind. He'd seen the lion leap, Nell lying in the snow, the snarling yellow beast daring him to come and fight, and come he would. With roar on roar he hurled himself through the snow in the wake of the big cat. Over the rocks and out of sight, his voice echoing and re-echoing among the peaks. Johnny was kneeling beside poor crumpled Nell when Patricia came struggling up the slope. Behind her came Bob, panting mightily, and further back was Bill's disconsolate, slinking figure. Johnny looked hopefully at Patricia. "Can you take care of Nell?" he called after her. "Of course I can," she answered, in a voice so thoroughly matter-of-fact that it surprised him. So without hesitating for a moment, he left Nell with her and started after Reddy, knowing that every second counted. Reddy, meanwhile, was managing to keep the big cat in view, although he would not gain while racing uphill. He wasted no breath in baying now. The grim, grueling chase to a finish was on. Halfway up the far side of the mountain's rocky peak climbed the lion, and then stopped on a ledge of rock to look down on the hound. He could have made a stand there, but something in the determined look of Reddy made him start running again, this time toward another rocky peak, on the other side of the wooded valley. It was a hard run, but he made it easily with his long, graceful leaps, and soon was among the bare rocks on the side of the precipice. Now he stopped again to look back, confident that his foe would not follow, but he saw Reddy still plowing after him. With hate in his heart, he crouched to wait for the hound and fight. But once more he lost his nerve and dashed away to gain an even more inaccessible perch on a precipice directly opposite. This was close to one of his favorite dens, a cave that no man had yet found, where he had several times taken refuge when hard pressed. He hesitated to go to it. There was only one outlet, and that meant that he would be cornered if the hound managed to reach it. He took a look at the cave, half expecting his mate to be there ahead of him, but it was empty. Inside he crouched and waited, but this too was hard on his nerves. He had to sneak out and try to see what the hound was doing. Reddy had trouble with slippery, hidden ledges. Twice he fell and rolled, but the snow saved him from getting hurt, and he knew a good deal about dangerous places like this. The stiff breeze eddying around the rocks brought the lion scent to him, and told him now that the cat was waiting, somewhere very close. In spite of his rage, he slowed to a cautious walk, almost a stalk. There was no sound, but always that telltale scent, which he hated, and which warned him that at any moment he might meet the charging foe. Always in the past, when he faced a danger like this, he had the help of the big black wolf. But now it was different. He was on his own, only himself and the powerful yellow beast on this bleak mountain, up in the sky with the world far below. Any other hound would have hesitated and perhaps turned back, or at most stayed where he was safe and bayed with the hope that someone would come to his aid. But none of these things even occurred to Reddy. He had a job to do and he was going to do it. So almost crawling along the narrow edge, he caught sight of the movement in the rocks ahead and slightly above him. He saw the lion's head, ears back and mouth snarling. Quickly he changed direction and climbed upwards. And quickly he saw his foe retreat. Crawling along another edge, he came directly over the mouth of the cave and scented the cat again. This time was unmistakably close and directly beneath him, though hidden in the cave. Now the climbing was very difficult. He had to make a half circle in order to reach the level of the cave's entrance. Snow slipped from beneath his feet and fell in powdery clouds to the foot of the precipice. But he edged steadily nearer and suddenly was facing the cave on a little platform of wind-swept rock. Behind him was a precipice and a white valley below. In the front was the black interior of the cave, reeking with the scent of the foe, whose full fighting power he did not yet know. And Reddy, every hair on his back bristling, his teeth bared, and rumbling in his throat, walked deliberately forward. What happened came so suddenly that he was thrown hard against the side of the cave. The lion had charged at him from out of the blackness and had struck furiously with his left paw. But in the bad light he'd missed by a fraction of an inch and only hit him with his shoulder. Reddy recovered in an instant and gripped the top of the beast's neck, which was so muscular that he had to chew to get a good hold. Over on its back rolled the lion, with Reddy carrying down with him. Raking the claws of all 4 feet, the tawny beast tried to rip him from end to end, as he'd ripped other hounds. But Reddy held on and kept his body out of reach. And then the lion sprang to his feet and reared, dragging the hound and flinging him left and right, but still failing to get in a good blow. Each time Reddy's paws touched the ground, even for an instant, he managed to get a firmer hold, more of that great neck in his mouth, a better angle for his teeth. Now the lion rolled again wildly. It dashed around the cave, half dragging Reddy, half throwing him against the sides, his weight seeming like nothing against the frenzied power of the beast. Once it rose on its hind legs and went over backward, hurling Reddy to the ground. A claw ripped his thigh, but he scarcely felt it in the mad exultation of the fight. His jaws locked, he maneuvered with lightning quickness of the cat itself to always keep behind, always enough in balance to dodge with his body when the blows were aimed, or the snarling, screeching animal bit at him. Dust filled the cave and swirled out of the entrance, but neither fighter could see much anyways from his bloodshot eyes, and in the close fury of the action, the ears seemed deaf to all the hideous noise. An impulse to escape from the cave suddenly gripped the lion and gave it added strength, for now it dragged the heavy hound straight for the entrance in a maniacal attempt to escape at any cost. Reddy held back desperately, but could find no adequate hold for his toes, and the valley came into view in all of its whiteness and dangerous distances. The cat was striving to get out, regardless of the precipice. Rather than fight longer, was the certainty now. Yet Reddy held on, dug his toes into the rocks, and swung the lion sideways, only to strike a slippery place and go head over heels with his foe rolling in a tussle which brought them to the edge of the rock platform, and then over it, and into space. They grazed the side of the precipice 10 feet below, and slid 50 feet with a mass of snow, and then hurled into space again, and landed among bushes and rocks with a thud, which Johnny heard from the opposite ridge as he helplessly watched the performance. After that, everything was hidden in the snow, but he could see no movement, and had the sickening feeling that Reddy was dead. Coming down from the ridge with reckless speed, the ranger saw both Marshall and the foreman below him hurrying to the same spot from a pass at the right. He was the first, however, to reach the precipice, and almost stumbled over the lion which was buried in the snow. Several paces further, also covered with snow, he found Reddy amid red stains which gave him an ominous foreboding, and for several seconds held him from uncovering the body. Reddy, however, suddenly stirred and whined. Hastily then Johnny clawed at the snow with his bare hands and freed the hound, who tried hard to rise, and finally succeeded in getting to his feet again, only to fall down and lie panting for more than a minute. Again, however, he staggered up and nosed about in the snow until he discovered the lion, whereupon he stood looking down at it, as if making sure it was dead, and then sank down himself beside the long body. The three men watched, silent and overcome by the tragedy of the drama, and the courage and greatness that a dog like this could show. "If I hadn't seen it, I never would have believed it," Marshall said at length, and oddly enough his hat was in his hand as he stood there. Johnny was kneeling beside Reddy, who, though still panting, was able to lick his hands. "The cat was underneath when they came down. I saw it," said the foreman. "Otherwise old Reddy would be gone by now." "Never was there such a fight," added Marshall, and he tried to drag the tawny beast to one side. They scraped bare of snow a few feet of ground beside the boulder, and built a fire of dead spruce limbs. Johnny examined Reddy's body and legs and made sure that he was not fatally injured. "He's terribly bruised and cut up, and a rib or two may be broken," he decided, "but I believe he'll pull through. He certainly ought to after winning a battle like that. Think of it, single-handed finish the biggest mountain lion I've ever seen around here." This from Marshall, who was beginning to glow with pride and success of this venture. A distant hail told them that Bob was coming through the pass. They answered jubilantly. Soon the boy reached them and was looking at the lion. "Gee whiz," he managed to say. "Gee whiz." And those two words seemed adequate to express what all of them felt. End of chapter 11.